Welcome to the Everlasting Podcast, the ultimate destination for CEOs, founders, and changemakers like you, who are not only satisfied with success, but striving to create everlasting fulfillment. I'm your host, Nico van der Venne, entrepreneur and fervent believer in the power of everlasting fulfillment. Do you find yourself pondering what's beyond success? Have you ever thought about everlasting fulfillment? If so, you're in the right place. Here, we don't just talk about business, we talk about the journey from success to fulfillment. We'll engage in insightful conversations with distinguished CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs, and experts in various fields each week. We'll uncover the secrets to creating a sustainable business, transcending societal norms, and building everlasting fulfillment. So if you're ready to go beyond profits and accolades to create everlasting fulfillment in life and business, stick around, because the Everlasting Podcast is the strategic insight you've been waiting for. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, we have somebody very special in our midst, Samantha Amit. Welcome to the podcast. Who are you and what do you do?
Hey Nico, how are you doing today? I'll tell you in a minute. How are you, first of all?
I'm doing great. I'm just enjoying the time to record these wonderful podcast episodes because I learn so much from so many different people. So I'm really excited to listen to your story here.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. You know, when we were speaking for a few minutes before you hit record, it made me think about my beginnings, where I felt like I was on the treadmill, always running and like striving for my next achievement and my next success. And I didn't have time to rest along the way because I thought any form of rest was a waste of time. In a way, I still do. I have to continue to break that myth, and so I'm a mindfulness practitioner. I'm a leadership coach, and I'm a trained mindfulness practitioner. And I came to mindfulness out of a deep need to use your words, to actually to have some sense of fulfillment in life, because nothing was ever good enough for me, because whenever I reached my success or my level that I was aiming for, then I was already on to the next thing that I wanted to achieve.
Yeah.
And so that's a very hard way to live.
Absolutely.
And when I became a mother, the first kid was okay. I managed to, manage my career. I was in high tech and software, a very big global company in the e-enterprise business. And the second kid came along, and that's when everything kind of crashed, because I really stepped into a huge sense of shame and guilt. So, I managed my overwhelm and I managed, the anxiety pretty well. I mean, anybody that's a high achiever, like pushes through the fear. You have to, we take risks. Right. If you're a risk taker. So that's a bit about me. So I came to mindfulness, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that quite a bit.
Yeah. I'm excited about it. It's something that a lot of people hear about, but what is it exactly? That's the question I sometimes hit on. It's like, well, do you practice mindfulness? And then look, what planet are you from? And it's like, sometimes it used to be a very popular word to describe a very big, broad aspect of what it is, I found. But I think you're probably better at explaining it than I am, if you're the real deal right here.
Yeah. So I'll tell you what it isn't. It isn't, getting relaxed. Mindfulness isn't about being relaxed and being fulfilled, actually, because there's we don't know what's going to actually be. It's a way of being in the world. It's a way of being present with other layers of things. So for CEOs, it would be actually being present with acceptance of what is. And it doesn't mean that you want to change it. Now, I think CEOs, or like, let's say, senior directors that are leading like big orgs and big divisions, they are pretty good at accepting things that go wrong in the business world, right? So if a deal goes wrong, they have to move on, cut their losses, make decisions, and move on. So maybe the acceptance piece, they're not so bad at. However, and maybe also the letting go piece, also not. Mindfulness is being present with other things as well. So it's being purposely present in the moment and non-judgmentally. That's John Kabat-Zinn's definition. So this non-judgmental part of the definition, being present fully in the moment, purposely and non-judgmentally, that's like, what does that mean? Because our brains are wired to actually keep us safe. And so our brains are wired to be on the lookout for, like
the saber-toothed tiger in the bushes.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah.
But I think what I heard you say is about, executive and CEOs, they're used to accepting certain situations or going through those situations. What I wonder sometimes, and what I've noticed sometimes, is that they tackle that really well. But the question sometimes is where do they put the questions that come after? Because usually in those stories, when it's happening, you just go through the story. It happens, so you just accept the situation and you move on to the solution or not a strategy or whatever. And then a few moments later, or even a time later, it kind of hits you back in the face and say, remember that you were actually very stressed at the time. Your adrenaline saved you right there. You saw the saber-toothed tiger in the bushes and you escaped it, or you controlled the situation. You didn't go into fight or flight. But what did happen is you come back right now, you're at ease. And this is a point where I found what I know about about mindfulness is it helps you also cope with the aftermath of a situation. Because you get
right. So the way I see it is that it helps you not only cope, but it's a way of life. So the form of mindfulness that I practice, that I work with, which is a very particular kind of practical mindfulness for business. So where this comes from, mindfulness you can find first of all in all the religions, and you can say it comes also from Buddhism, from the East. However, my mentor and teacher, who's John Kabat-Zinn, who brought mindfulness to the West, what he did is he actually he did some experiments. So he was a professor emeritus at a university and at one of the medical schools, and he did 2 control groups. And as John was also a Zen yogi, and so what he did is he created this 8-week program called MBSR, Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction. And what he did with these 2 control groups is he took people with chronic illnesses and he put them through the program. It was an 8-week program where you practice mindfulness every day. And he put, he had this control group. And that's when he did this about 50 years ago. And that's when mindfulness started becoming famous in the West because he documented it and he put it through research. And so what he did is he adapted meditation to what the West can do. So in mindfulness, there's walking meditation. There is eating meditation. There's many forms of practicing present moment awareness. So why am I saying all this? Because if you adapt it into your life, into your work and into your life, also as a CEO, as a senior director, EVPs that I work with, SVPs, then it can be practiced any time of day.
Mm-hmm.
Like now, when you're listening to me,
Mm-hmm.
you can be letting go of your thoughts, breathing, coming back
Indeed.
to the breath, right? Feeling your body, feeling your feet on the floor, and just taking the time to just like ease into it, breathe as you're listening to me. That's a mindfulness practice.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty simple, isn't it? It's something that a lot of people kind of make it so complicated. We were talking earlier as well, right before we started the show, about meditation. And I found so many different kinds of influences and books and comments about what meditation is. And I remember a couple of years back, I was doing a workshop, and there was a few people there who were extremely excited because they were going to learn meditation. And I was like, really, what do you expect here? Is like golden goose flying around or something like that? And in a certain moment, they were all sitting. They were ready for me explaining what we were going to do. And I said, okay, let's sit down. Let's just relax a little bit. Put yourself in a comfortable situation and feel your feet on the floor. And I think I stayed quiet for about 1 minute, which is an astonishing long time for a lot of people when they're in a workshop. They all think, yeah, what's the next thing? What's going to be? It's like you said earlier,
Yes.
you go from one thing to the other, and you just, you're
Yes.
expecting the next
When's
thing.
he going to start talking already and
Yeah,
telling us what we need to learn? Yeah.
Complete silence, awkward.
Yeah.
Oh no, I
Yeah.
feel so comfortable in silences. It's sometimes awkward for other people, and one of the persons just started, they started wiggling around. It's like, I feel uncomfortable and this and that. And they said, so what's next? And I said, well, you're doing exactly what you're here to do. I said, okay, maybe we can upgrade this. We can go to just notice that you're breathing. It's like, this is something that I do all day. It's like an automatic thing. Yeah, but did you notice that you're breathing? And then you see the complication and the influences of all these ideas of what is meditation, and you have to do it so many minutes and so much, the position, you have to cross your legs and whatever. And like, no, you just really simply just notice something. It doesn't have to be breathing. It's just amazing. And I found that the simplest approach that is within meditation, which is indeed a more Eastern way of doing things, and we've learned that from our dear friend Kung Fu master Bruce Lee and so on. Where in our Western environment, I found it funny. Sorry, I'm skipping from one thing to another, but my mentor said, we are Western. We are not used to crossing our legs. We are used to sitting on a chair. That's already a big difference. So if you're doing Eastern things, you need to do the Eastern things the Western way. And that's kind of where, I find that amazing how complicated it sometimes can be made. So I don't know if you notice anything like that in when you're working with customers there at that point.
Yeah, so when I do workshops or teach mindfulness within companies, I do it the Western way. So we sit in boardrooms and we don't sit on mats or sit on the floor. Mm-hmm. It's different if I'm doing it in a private setting, then we will sit on the floor cross-legged, but yeah. So I want to actually go back to your question, if it's okay, Nico, around what is mindfulness. And I want to specifically really, answer thinking of the CEO in mind. Mm-hmm. Is that okay? CEO, like really senior people. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things of mindfulness is that you want to become present and aware of your thinking, mm-hmm. your emotions, and also sensations in the body, and be accepting of them. In other words, actually just notice, as you use the word, to notice, to observe what's going on.
Indeed.
And I have this ACT model, ACT, mm-hmm. and it's a mindfulness ACT model because a lot of people think that mindfulness is like a passive thing. but it's actually an act because you need to do something. You need to actually watch your thinking. You need to watch and identify your emotions and be aware of like what's going on in the body. Sometimes even just one of them, sometimes, and it could be other things as well, like sound, for example.
Absolutely.
So what I think happens with a lot of people that are very successful, what I know that happens is that in the ACT model, the achieve part is about me and myself. And that's the part where I am aware of my thinking, my emotions, and my sensations.
Mm-hmm.
Then the C is the connect. It's about how I am with my one-on-ones, with my direct reports, with my leadership team, my one-to-many relationships. And then the T is for thrive, for thinking about the business. It's going out of the ego and into the we. Now, what CEOs are very good at doing is they're very good at considering what's best for the business.
Uh-huh.
And then they can make these decisions based on what's good for the business, which is very different to other managers. Because, like, let's say engineers, which I often work for, are very centered on, being in the state of the art technology and, learning and using, and what they're building. Whereas a CEO or somebody that's responsible for the business has to think business, business, business.
Yeah.
And so that person is not always aware of their emotions. Sometimes they want to block their emotions because if they, for example, need to fire somebody because, something's not profitable, whatever. So it's just easier to numb their emotions or not even be, not even consider. And so to start practicing mindfulness where you start becoming aware of your thinking that is not just business orientated, but maybe that person, like thinking about, other things, starting to identify the different emotions in their many, starting to know what's going on in your body, that can be really hard. And so I would say for your clients, it's a challenge to actually embrace mindfulness. But the research shows us that when you do, that's what can lead to their fulfillment because it's a much more holistic approach. It's not just, being on the treadmill and going from deal to deal, but actually meeting yourself where you are and realizing, oh, I'm actually hurt now. And I'm not just going to put the hurt aside and move on. I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to give it space. I'm going to be compassionate. I'm going to be loving to myself, which is not something that everybody knows to do. That's why mindfulness is also about practicing compassion. And there's, for example, Kristen Neff talks about, self-compassion and compassionate leadership. And she's quite a mindfulness just around that.
Oh, yeah. But it's indeed something that is, it's very confronting sometimes, isn't it? It's for a CEO, they are playing the solo game most of the time. So the one they're having the conversations with is themselves because they, determine a lot of parts on strategy, on the next steps, etc., etc. So what I find amazing is where you're saying you confront yourself. And that's indeed not always easy, especially when it comes down to saying that you're going to be empathic or you give yourself some space or be lovable to yourself. I think a lot of C-levels, when they hear the word love, they're starting to think of the woo-woo story. It's like, oh no, they're going to go emotional here. But at the end of the day, we're all humans, we're not robots. And what I've been reading up on McKinsey, they brought a report, I think, a couple of months back, where they were clearly making a point where the level of pressure that a CEO is under these days is X amount more than a few years back. You had CEOs who were there from like 15 to 20 years. These days, if they hit the 5-year mark, there's a celebration because the pressure is so high. And one of the reasons they brought up was the solitude. So the conversation with self, the doubt, the the feeling of inadequacy, etc., which was a byproduct. And it was not because they were that way. It's just because they were so very, they're actually moving so fast that they didn't take the time to, confront themselves with situations, or end up really realizing where they were, or what they just did, or what they were going to do, by just stopping there. So I think that's indeed where mindfulness might be a very good starting point to, say, okay, where am I now, and what do I feel, or what do I sense in my body?
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
kind of might bring up the pains that are
Absolutely. Yeah.
old age
So,
pains.
yeah. So, with what you're saying is, and regarding burnout, I think that you were naming,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe there's other words that you can call it, but basically, when somebody is just, like if you run a marathon, after a marathon, you definitely need to take time to rest.
Mm-hmm.
And from a neuroscience point of view, your adrenaline completely drops afterwards, and you actually get a bit depressed as well.
Yeah.
And what happens is, I think people that are in the fast lane are just running marathons continuously, and they don't take their time to rest.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the ways that I practice mindfulness myself personally, and I've got this from a professor that actually deals with, I think his name is Judd. I'm terrible with names, but he's a professor at one of the top universities, and he specializes in addictions, people that have addictions, and he practices mindfulness. And when I heard him years ago, and I mean years ago, because I've written a book also on mindfulness and I have a digital course on mindfulness. So, but when I heard that he practiced mindfulness lying down, I thought, if this, sorry about my language, I'm also lying down and practicing if it's going to get me to practice, I'm going to lie down as well.
Yeah.
And so what happened is I sometimes sit and I sometimes lie down. Now, when you practice mindfulness and you get into a habit of it, what it does is it activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which probably you can explain to also the listeners about. Maybe they've heard on your podcast as well. But basically what that means is it's the system that calms us down, because we are in sympathetic nervous system mode, which is the one that's contracted. It's the one, you can't see me, but I'm holding my hands. It's it's the one that, did you speak about it now? I don't think it was you, it was on another call where somebody said, like, as if you see a bear in the wilderness and you're running for your life, or you see a snake. That's how we behave. We're like always on alert, especially we're on alert. What's happening with the market? What's happening with the steel, do I have the people? Do I have the resources, etc.? And so it's nerve-wracking. And so we don't have time to calm down. We're always as if in emergency mode. And so what that does to the body is not only does it, it harms us also from a well-being point of view. And so mindfulness has been researched that it activates the parasympathetic nervous system. Now, how I do it and how I recommend it is, first of all, there's the body scan that you can Google body scan, mindfulness body scan, and you can do that. It's a great thing to do also if you wake up at night and you're stressed out, which a lot of people, by the way, have sleeping problems.
Oh, yeah.
Because they wake up at night and they're thinking about their problem and they can't get back to sleep. Okay. Yeah. So instead of thinking about your problem, what you do is you go into the body and you do the body scan. So you're giving your mind a break from all the thinking around the problem. That's not going to go away so quickly anyway in the middle of the night.
Yeah, we know that. Yeah, absolutely.
And you do the body scan. So I really recommend for CEOs to practice the body scan to,
Well, yeah, it's as simple as that. Indeed, there's a lot of stuff going on, but in the end, and I'm also an experienced non-sleeper by here, waving my hand. I also wake up at 3 a.m. with a lot of stuff in my mind and racing around. And where I usually use, I have never named it mindfulness, but I use it as a meditation method, is really starting to count my toes. Like really paying attention. I'm like right now I'm sitting right here, I can notice my toes being in my slippers because I'm in my home office, so I don't put on shoes, of course.
Yes. Yes.
I'm more relaxed.
Of course.
And I also noticed that I actually have my feet a little bit out of my slippers and stuff like that. And you
Mm,
just go from step to step. It's really simple, isn't it? It's just
yeah.
taking the time to move away from the highest point in your body to the lowest point, and then working
Yeah.
your way up. And you could do it either way. You can either go
Yeah.
from the top to the
Yeah.
bottom. But indeed, I've used this technique so many times already, and each and every time I do add a little spice on there is by looking down with my eyes. So I actually force my eyes to look down, because then you force your eyelids downwards. You know, if you're awake at night and your eyes are open, or you're just muttering around in your brain, your eyes start flipping from one side to another because you're thinking. And if you start using the body scan with your eyes down, within just maybe I can't time it. You know, it's like within a few minutes you're knocked out and you're gone for another couple
Right.
of hours. And indeed, it's very powerful, so simple. But what I've
So,
learned,
yeah.
oh, sorry, yeah, go right ahead.
No, so I agree. I think it's, I think that when you're really successful, you're good at also the quick wins and also taking risks.
Hmm.
And if you can find a quick win that is going to help you to restore your body to, equilibrium,
Hmm.
because that's a big part of mindfulness. Because I think a big part of not being able to be fulfilled is we don't even take time to stop that much and come in touch with what's going on with us.
Yeah.
And so there are a number of things you can do. What you do, I actually practice with my clients in my meetings, in my sessions. I practice mindfulness. So I would encourage you to practice that with them,
Hmm.
or ask them if they are doing a practice at all. Because what happens is sometimes people try something and then they stop doing it. And
Oh
if they
yeah.
would have just continued,
Hmm.
it would make such a difference. You need the reps to start feeling the difference. So, what
Hmm.
we're talking about now is about lowering stress. And when we lower stress, we can actually start feeling happier, because what we do is, we can activate that within ourselves, but we need to first lower the stress, just and start feeling again,
Hmm.
you know, getting in touch with our feelings. And so there are a number of different exercises that you can do. And I would advise somebody that really wants a change
Hmm.
to find something small and start there, but to be consistent, because you know that you have to be consistent to see,
Yeah.
to be successful in anything.
Hmm.
I mean, you can have luck, but with this, if we want to make change within our body and also our health, and also stay longer in the role, it's
Yeah.
it's it's a yeah.
I think what you're explaining to me is, I find that to be described as the domino effect, but not the domino effect where the little rocks are staying the same size. There's a book called The Slight Edge, which is an amazing book, and it's about your continuous um, presence in situations, and you build up to a certain point where the stress is something that builds up, and it's within your shoulders, it's within your body, etc., etc. So it's always what do you call it?
Yeah.
Accumulating. That's the word.
Yes.
Wow, kind of walked over
I
my
got
tongue
you.
right there. And in this case, there's this calculation where you push over one of the domino blocks, and the one that's next is a little bit bigger, and the one that's next is a little bit bigger. And because of the force that's caused, you actually, I think, if at the 43rd layer, you could actually topple over a domino that's the size between the Earth and the Moon or something. It's calculation.
Wow,
It's amazing. It's really a fun thing to
interesting.
read. And that makes me think as well, if you do these little things, and it doesn't have to take half an hour or an hour, you can just be in your
Absolutely.
meeting room and just be,
Yes.
yeah, and basically
Yeah.
enjoying the success, because sometimes that's what we
Right.
forget. What goes wrong, we remember, we
Yes.
look at it really
Yeah.
close, but when it comes to
Yeah.
success, that's the
Yeah.
point where yeah,
Yeah.
one.
And like even what you said about like feeling your toes, It's just that moment that you take to drop into that habit that's so powerful for you, that gets you into, just coming back into the body, and it relaxes you.
Mm-hmm.
And so it sets off that domino effect of, just relaxing the body for those few seconds. And if you do that multiple times a day, it can be very, very good for you.
Yeah. I think that's the key point, isn't it? Multiple times a day.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
doing it once is okay, it's good.
Exactly. So I think, for the way we live, to practice mindfulness just once a day of sitting on a cushion, that's not my approach. I'm not saying it won't work.
Mm-hmm.
My approach is actually using it throughout the day, and then bearing in mind the person in front of you. So another thing I really recommend also is mindful walking.
Oh yeah.
So that doesn't mean walking with your phone and doing business calls.
No, that's not.
So preferably you would even leave your phone behind,
Mm-hmm.
and go for a walk, and you take a bit of a slower walk, and then you feel in again. I really would recommend for CEOs to feel into their body and feel into their emotions. And if they're going to notice their thinking, to notice what thoughts are there, and to start questioning their thinking. And that they can do, through journaling, through which a lot of CEOs are already doing. They're already journaling and have awareness around them. A lot of them have really good practices in place, like they set their intention at the beginning of the day where they plan. But they don't always ask, how am I feeling right now?
Mm-hmm.
They don't always check when they come out of a meeting, what's their energy like?
Yeah.
What's my mental and emotional level and physical energy level like? And if you're feeling a bit drained, then maybe taking that mindful walk outside, because nature heals.
Oh yeah, that's
And,
true. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. Well, I remember when so I think it was 2004 or 2006. I was in a full blown burnout depression story. We really went under, and it was my first touch and experience with meditation. I was at a psychiatrist's office, and she set me down on a cushion, and she was a really lovely lady, and she just said, "Sit down and breathe. That's all you need to do today. That's all you need to do today." And I was like, "This is the first. Okay, just experience it." But the mind race that goes on is amazing. Where you end up with your mind is just amazing. And over the years, what I've learned indeed is, in the morning you describe what do you want to do today that is critical to get to your goals. One thing, what do I need to do, that one thing that I need to do to make everything else easier. That's one of the things that I've learned in the morning. And I've learned as well, by using this awareness, which is then mindfulness, um, is coming back to that point during the day several times, because we're used to stepping into the office, start to work, and then that calls in, and then somebody else walks in and they send you an email, and then people say, "Have you replied to my email?" The classic story of everybody's environment. But what I've learned there is to say, "Hold up, I actually log off my computer sometimes." You lock your computer and turn around away from my screen and think of, okay, what was the one thing that I was going to do today? Did I already do that? That was the first question that I asked myself. And then I do the body scan, like you say, but then really quickly and say, is there something hurting? Is there something that needs rest? And indeed, when lunchtime is the ideal moment to start walking. I usually walk to the coffee machine and back, but I tend to go longer and take my time to go there. But it's amazing how efficient being aware of the muscles in your legs moving, because we use this body so easily. It is like, well, it's there, just use it. No, these mechanics are so complicated. There's so many muscles going around, and when you start
Yeah.
noticing those things, that's amazing, isn't it? The feeling you get at that time, you just in the moment, there's nothing else. And then start thinking back on, what was that one thing, or did I experience something amazing already today? all these little things you could start to
Gratitude.
incorporate. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. So I love what you're describing around, how you integrated into your day at different times of day, acknowledging your body, the wonder of being alive, feeling your muscles. And I think as coaches, I've met a lot of coaches. Most coaches actually practice meditation that I know.
Hmm.
I work a lot with coaches, so I know a lot of them that actually practice meditation, but they don't help their clients integrate it into their life. Maybe that should be a side business for me.
It would be a good idea. Yeah.
Because I'll tell you why. Like, I practice meditation with my clients every day. Every day that I'm in a coaching session, we actually practice. And so it's actually, for me, it's like a double win or triple win or more, because
I
I'm
can
I'm
imagine.
practicing myself as well.
Yeah.
And it helps them because it helps them get into it. And my philosophy is that it's very hard to start when you're in burnout. So maybe it is a time when but when you're going through so much difficulty, it's the hardest time to actually watch your thinking or look at your emotions, because everything's dark. So your thinking scares you. I mean, your emotions are, are fearful, or, full of anxiety, and or you numb. And so I think that there's enough, people are wise, and so they know today that they need to look after themselves mentally, emotionally, and physically. So it's not enough to just work out at the gym. We need
Hmm.
to also mentally work out, and it's not just about focus, which, by the way, we haven't even touched on that, but mindfulness is really very helpful for focusing and for being more strategic.
Hmm.
And with, let's say, AI now, that's putting a lot of pressure on businesses and companies. Like, leaders need to reinvent themselves, and
Hmm.
they need to think in new ways and bring in new approaches into their businesses.
Yeah.
And so mindfulness also really helps you to be more strategic. It helps you to be more creative, just by, watching your mind, and that patience when there's so many different exercises that you can do. Up
Hmm.
to now in our conversation, we've been focusing on a lot on stress reduction
Yeah.
and on building awareness. But there's a whole other side of mindfulness that I think is very relevant for CEOs, that causes a lot of the anxiety, is how do I stay up there?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So if they understand that mindfulness can help you stay up there from on multiple levels, not only on the level of helping you, manage your stress, but on the level of helping you be strategic, be focused.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, because when you're meditating and you keep coming back, like, let's say you keep coming back to the counting of your toes, when
Yeah.
your mind drifts off to whatever, and that's what our minds do, you bring it back to the counting, right?
Yeah.
So in yoga, which is a form of mindfulness meditation,
Hmm.
if you are in a yoga class, if you don't have a good teacher, like, a lot of teachers will tell you to watch your breathing in the yoga.
Yeah.
The whole thing about yoga is also to come back into the body and actually watch what's going on, like you watch your muscles. You probably
Yeah.
know this, right?
Indeed. Yeah. Indeed.
And so
Yeah.
a lot of people don't know there's like a whole philosophy around yoga. So yoga is a form of mindfulness body meditation.
Hmm.
And there's a whole philosophy of yoga that you can learn for years. It's not just about exercise or breathing. It's
Yeah.
much more vast than that.
Oh yeah. It's an amazing subject to go into. I don't have a lot of trainings that I followed on yoga or anything. I've practiced yoga a couple of years back. I did it very very vividly. These years I've kind of stopped with it because I focused on other things. But there's a lot of practices out there. It's basically what you said earlier, where there's a lot of religion, where all these little things are present in a certain way, even in well, I've been raised Christian, so not that I'm going to church anymore, but let's say I'm just and we used to, praying was you sat on your knees and you held your hands and then you did your praying, which is a form of conveying a message with an intention and focusing on that message. So there's a focus point there. And that's what I found as well in a lot of practices is where do you put your focus? And if you use meditation, you learn to upgrade your focus more and more and more. You train it. It becomes a habit of switching back to the breathing, switching back to the toes, switching back to the tummy ache or whatever that happens at that time. I did a meditation at one point where I went for a very long period without eating. Not that I was had any problems or anything or stuff like that, but it was a test that I was able to do, and it was like 24 hours without eating, and then you start meditating on the feeling of hunger and asking yourself what is within the feeling of hunger, and you start to concentrate on the feeling of hunger. But it was not the feeling of hunger that was important. It was what's happening in my body was the thing that you needed to notice. So going through a feeling, going into a physical feeling, and then building on that and keeping the focus on that physical feeling, which was kind of a training. And it was related to being a proactive leader. Because if you're focused as a leader, you're trained on being focused on a certain point as a leader, you're also able to keep your strategy as top of mind. And if then anything comes in that has a conflict with your strategy or your idea what you're bringing into your company, you're able to understand what's going on, what's going to happen with that strategy if you don't keep on that focus, etc., etc. And it was a very, very amazing. It was an amazing exercise to do. Very tiring as well, but and I had a very big hamburger right after that. But anyway, so no, it's fun to do all these different techniques and find exactly what you feel welcome in or feel good with, and then start integrating it. If you're saying that you're doing it every time you do sessions, I find that that's just a great start. Like you said, of course, you yourself will enjoy that as well. You're doing your meditation at the same time. And one of my students at one point said, but if you're doing it and you're talking to us, you're not meditating. I'm saying, well, actually I am, because I am focusing so much on my words, on how it influences the environment, that I am again focusing and learning to meditate on those words, etc., etc. And when it comes down to walking and being in the moment of the walking, it all strengthens your leadership, because you know who you are, you know what you're doing, you know where you're going. All of those facets come into play in that story, don't they? And that's where I understand what you're saying, that it's an active way of meditating. That's amazing.
So I still think it's very active, and it's an active way. We call it informal. I think that's what you're referring to. Formal meditation is where you sit on a cushion, for example. That's formal meditation, where you do vipassana, which is insight meditation. And so let's just summarize a few things as you were talking that I was thinking about.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So one thing I want to say is, I know a lot of CEOs have been on retreats before. So they've done their meditation retreats, and that's great. They book and they go away on holidays here. They book their holiday or they book their retreat. And I think that's fantastic. But I do think that because of the pace of life that we live in, because of the complexity of business today, because of the turbulence, so there's speed, turbulence, complexity, I think that it's not enough to have holidays and to go on retreat. So those are two things, like holidays with your family for fun, retreats, go away on a week retreat or a weekend. It's fantastic, do that.
Mm-hmm.
I believe, and this is my belief, and this is why I created the course, is that you do need to integrate it into your day because of what I just said.
Yeah.
So then there's different. So that's the one thing. So the retreat is great. Do that, but you do need to daily have a practice. So even if you start with 5 minutes and then you have other things during the day, that's fantastic. So if you're already going to yoga 3 times a week, great. You're practicing mindfulness. But
Mm-hmm.
up there, what else can I do? So, okay, so I'll do what Nico says. I wake up in the middle of the night. I'm going to do the breathing. I'm going to count my toes. Okay, great. That's another thing I do. Then I'm going to, in the morning, I'm going to turn my chair around. I'm going to ask myself, how am I right now? Maybe after every meeting, I'm just going to take a pause and a pulse and say, okay, what's my energy like? So to do these things, to build awareness around what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So when we do this, there are different things that the mindfulness is creating. It's building awareness, and depending on the amount that we're doing and the reps we do. So, for example, when you now focus on your toes, you immediately are going to relax from it because
Mm-hmm.
you've done it so many times. But
Mm-hmm.
when you've done it like 10 times or even 50 times, it's not going to relax you. But when you've done it like 1,000 times,
Yeah.
just the act of doing that is going to cause your parasympathetic nervous system to kick in, which is fantastic.
Indeed. Indeed.
So that's that form. And then there's the insight meditation, which is fantastic which I do a lot of in the sessions. So how that looks like is it helps. I don't know if you've done this in therapy before, but there's something called co-regulation. Have you heard of this before? When you're
Uh,
with somebody, it often creates something like it creates a new
oh yeah.
space.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
So,
The
like
bubbles.
us
We
talking,
call it the
yeah,
bubbles. Mm-hmm.
okay. So when you're with a coach in a session or in a meeting, or a therapist or a mentor or a strategic advisor, often that opens up insight because you bring something into the space,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you're talking about it, like a brainstorming session, let's say.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's such a thing where you can meditate over a sentence. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll sit in silence and I'll meditate over, even it could be something that I want to, like, let's say I want to do a workshop, or I want to, let's say the CEO is going to talk to, somebody that they want to merge with, and they want to think about it. So they sit, they ground themselves, they think about it, and then they start imagining. Maybe they do this already, but you can add like a mindfulness flavor to it. So it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like a ritual that you do. So
Uh-huh.
James Clear, Atomic Habits, and BJ
Oh yeah.
Fogg, they talk about stacking. So
Yeah.
you're already doing the brainstorming. So
Mm-hmm.
add on to that the breathing, add on it, gratitude of, being able to even I mean, there's so many things you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of things you can do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's amazing. It's especially what you're saying. If you're in a one-on-one session, um, I'll just give you an example of a very specific situation I had. So I had somebody who was he had very heavy panic attacks. So he was a leader. He had a lot of people that were dependent on him, and at some point he got to a point where he lost control. He just started getting panic attacks. And one of the sessions we did was we sat in front of each other, and of course, for me, it was the start was like, okay, I need to protect myself from any influence that come in. It's just a standard thing that I am used to doing. So I did that, and I told him, okay, you're just going to breathe and let me watch your breath. And we started synchronizing those breaths. And then I said, okay, so let's go to a point where you're feeling that you're going to go into a panic. And I started feeling the same feeling that he had. And that's where I started trying to get him to realize what was going on. and lower the way of breathing again into, because if you have a panic attack, you're like, short of breath and kind of clamps everything up. And I explained to him, because I felt exactly the same. I explained to him what exactly he needed to do. And because he was guided and he was very conscious at the time about what was happening, after the session, he was telling me how amazing he felt, because I was saying exactly what he needed to hear. And I think that's also something that I've learned over the years, is that when we do all these techniques, when we take the time to breathe, when we take the time to be ourselves and be in the moment, the influence we have on our environment is so much stronger as well, because you yourself are getting stronger. You know who you are, you know exactly what you want. And as a CEO, that's something that you want to do in your boardroom. You have to be the man that has to, or the woman that has to stand there, know exactly what you're doing, and not go and run around and make all sorts of mistakes in your presentation. So I taught him in a couple of sessions later, where he had to do a presentation with somebody within a company that they were going to do an acquisition on. And he was very scared about it, because he said, if I mess this up, I lose my job, etc., etc. And I'm like, okay, you're talking about the future that has not happened yet. So let's come back into the now and do these exercises. And so what he did was, he came into the meeting room, and he asked the secretary to be in the meeting about 15 to 10 minutes earlier. And he just came in and sat down and was doing the breathing exercises and doing the meditation and everything with his eyes open. He was
That's
just looking at
excellent. Really excellent.
it was amazing. It came back and he was like, I did my presentation and it went so smooth. I knew exactly what to say. It was fun to see that come out of a person. Especially if you saw what it was earlier, the months earlier. So I don't know if you've had these kind of situations in the past, but I think these tools are so amazing.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you one more specific question. Is you talked earlier a little bit about your history and how you came into mindfulness. How do you see the story of mindfulness evolve into the future? Because we're, a lot more people are talking about it in the end. But how do you see it evolve into the future of business and of maybe just the day-to-day life?
So at the moment, a lot of businesses are doing it for different reasons. They're actually bringing it in on much lower levels. A lot of them are doing one-off workshops, but I think it's very nice if like this, the CEO would bring it into the business as a value. I can't say I see this happening, but I do see that there's a lot of advancement where there are a lot of people that want more, especially the millennials today. They care about their well-being and they care about fulfillment. And if the company isn't providing that, then they leave. And so sometimes companies are providing, equivalent mindfulness or things that are equivalent to keep, as a talent, to keep talent.
Yeah.
And to give it as not only as a welfare program and as a well-being program, but as, we care for you. And so, we have this. And I think that depending on the level you are, everybody needs it because, as I said, like to repeat, we live in a complex, fast-paced world, lots of uncertainty and turbulence. And our human brains don't like uncertainty. We're wired to want to feel safe. And so the more uncertain we feel, the more stressed we get. And when we're stressed, then our productivity goes down after a certain point. Like after a certain point, it's an inverted U. And then what happens also is, you have sick days off. It costs the company a lot. So people are bringing that in. But so just as an example that is relevant for what you were talking about with the guy with the panic attacks. I worked with a partner in a big, global accounting firm, that the way he actually did so well was he used to think of worst case scenarios. And so these worst case scenarios in his thinking really helped him, because it helped him prevent things that could derail. The problem is that he made this a form of life. And so everything he went into, his mind would go to thinking up, and he was very creative around all these terrible things that never happened, right?
Yeah.
And so he needed mindfulness to actually start even seeing his thinking, because he wasn't aware he was doing it. He was doing it unconsciously. So he became conscious of his thinking. And so everybody can use mindfulness in different ways, because again, it taps into our thinking, into our emotions, and into our sensations. It helps us to come back to center. It helps create more patience in the business. Trust, it increases trust. It's amazing for creating psychological safety. It's very good for innovation. And so across the business, CEOs could do really well in bringing that in. And then if they start participating, wow, that would be a huge wow. Because you know what, middle management and the younger say, oh, the CEO's not there, so I'm not taking it seriously. But if the CEO participates and the CEO actually brings it, that would be wow. There's something else that we haven't covered that I wanted to name, if it's okay that we navigate into something small. Yeah. So at the beginning, I explained that mindfulness is about, it has its flavors, or it has like things that are on top. So it's not just being present, it's how you're being present and what you're paying attention to. And so one of the qualities is called non-striving. And so a lot of CEOs, and you probably are aware of the above the line and below the line methodology, where above the line, we want to be above the line where we are fulfilled and we're achieving, but we're not anxious, right? We're collaborating, we're compassionate leaders, etc. And below the line is when people go into avoidance. They're highly competitive and they're not team players. They go into avoidance if they're upset, if they're hurt. Then you see people going off and not talking and passive aggressive, etc. Now, so striving is one of the things that is, if you want to always do well and you're always striving for the next thing and the next thing, that's not good for you. It's not a resonant way to be in the world. And so even like I'm just holding my fist here, so just like opening up. So non-striving is like almost like not being, when a dog runs and they pant and their tongues are out their mouth panting. Well, that's how some of us are, and what if we could be, prevent burnout and be more resonant, be that fulfilled leader, because we practice just the non-striving part. So the non-striving part comes with a lot of other things, like trusting, like maybe prayer in the morning. Like if you're a person that has faith, you can pray, and prayer is a mindfulness practice for sure.
Indeed. Yes.
And then bring that faith into business, like do everything you can, but in a non-striving way. Like you don't have to push so much.
Yeah. It's just something that you bring in, you show, and you're not telling everybody we need to do this. It's kind of a show and experience, and then others might say, oh, I'm going to try that because he looks a lot calmer when he's done that. Something like that. Very good influence. Yeah, indeed. I can believe that. Yeah. We've talked for about so many different subjects, and it's all around mindfulness. It's such a broad aspect, isn't it? It just got so many little things that can connect to it. And I think I always find it a little bit of a pity when something gets, a big stamp on it, when people have a certain perspective of something. And I really hope that by explaining a couple of these things with our talk right now, that indeed some C-levels might say, I'm going to look into this thing. What I want to add, and I can only say what I can say, is don't give up after 10 tries. This is work. It's something that has to be kept up and taken into account and taken with you and become a part of your life. And that's what you mentioned as well, Samantha, a couple of times, where it starts to get integrated. That's where where the fruit is the lowest on the tree, when it's integrated and you get used to using it. So I find that amazing that we can maybe influence that a little bit by our talk.
Yeah. So a lot of people start and then they say, "Oh, I wish I could go back," and they just don't go back. I had the app and I did it for a while and it was really great and I can't get back into that. And it's the same for a lot of things. And that's where having a coach does help.
Yeah,
because
indeed.
if you have a coach and that's one of your goals, it's not your only goal, but your goal is, let's say, like when people work with you on fulfillment and nurturing themselves and being a high achiever and getting the business in, etc., etc. So that could be part of the system, part of your structure, part of your daily structure.
Yeah, indeed.
And so, like there's thousands of ways you can, many different exercises you can do in sports. Like someone likes running, someone else likes swimming, someone likes baseball. Everybody likes something else. I like to dance, and so you find what you find what you like.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and so meditation's the same. You can find that practice that works for you now, and how you're going to start, and then you continue.
Yeah, you
There's no
start
reason
building.
not to. If somebody's listened to this, sorry to say, but there are no excuses.
That's a very good one. That's a very good one. Yeah, there are no excuses because
No,
it's
I mean,
so
if you
easy.
listen to the end, I mean, what did you listen for? That's what I always say to people, by the way. This is why it's called the ACT model. Because if somebody's going to come to you to just process something and be a sounding board, that's great. But you do want to integrate something into your life as well. So this is really a call out to you. If you've listened, reflect, say, okay, what am I taking from this? And okay, take your time. If it takes you a week, you don't have to do it today, not tonight or tomorrow morning, but in the next few days, decide what that is and decide how, like design it. A habit needs to be designed into somehow into, it needs to be, the best is for it to be part of something that you're already doing. Like if you've got a morning routine, then what am I going to add to my morning routine? If I'm a person of faith, and maybe I want to add a prayer just to, thank God that I woke up and that I have today to go through.
Yeah, waking up in the morning and just saying thank you. That's already a very, very fulfilling start of your day. Samantha, it's been a wonderful conversation, and I think we could talk for a long time, trying to convince people that they need to take up this wonderful, wonderful story of mindfulness. Where could people find you if they have any questions, or if they want to listen to one of your workshops or your track?
Yeah, thank you. So my website is askyourcoach.com with minuses in between. So it's ask-your-coach.com. And so I have a newsletter, and in the newsletter, I have every time it goes out. At the moment, it's like twice a month. I have case studies of how people integrate mindfulness into their work and life. And so that can give you good ideas. And then also my YouTube channel, I'm on LinkedIn. And I'm here for any questions via Nico, via LinkedIn.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great. Well, it was wonderful for you to take the time here to talk to me. I know you have a very busy schedule, so it's always a challenge to find that spot in the agenda to do the conversations. I hope to see a lot more people take on mindfulness after our conversation, and you'll probably get a couple of questions in the future anyway. So thank you very much to be here, and thank you everybody for listening.
Thank you everybody for listening.
Have a great one. Bye. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Everlasting Podcast. Don't forget to follow or subscribe or share this podcast episode with your friends. If it's inspiring to one person, the impact is clear. You want to know more about the everlasting fulfillment? Contact me on LinkedIn or go to my website www.nicovandevenene.com. That is www.nicovandevenne.com. Feel free to pick up your own ebook on the Beyond Success strategy. I hope to see you again next time during our next episode. Have a Beyond Success day.